You're walking down the hallway with a cup of tea in your hand. Maybe you're thinking about dinner. Maybe you're checking your phone. Maybe you're just heading to another room on autopilot. And then suddenly, your cat appears, right in the middle of the hallway. You step to the left, they slide left. You step to the right, they shift right. For a moment, it almost feels like they're doing it on purpose. Like they're trying to trip you. Like they've somehow calculated the exact spot in the house where you cannot avoid them. But this isn't random. And your cat isn't just being annoying. When a cat places themselves directly in your path, they are actually communicating something very specific. To us, it looks like a furry speed bump. To them, it's a message. And depending on the situation, that message can mean several different things. Some of them are surprisingly strategic. Others are surprisingly emotional. But the first reason has a lot to do with something behaviorists sometimes call the bottleneck effect. First, they're claiming the most powerful spot in the house. In the wild, survival for a cat often depends on how well they control their territory. Cats are incredibly aware of movement through space. They pay attention to who passes through certain areas, how often, and at what time. And in your home, few places matter more than narrow passages like hallways or doorways. These spaces act like natural choke points. Every member of the household eventually has to pass through them. So when your cat chooses to sit directly in the center of a narrow hallway, they're doing something that might seem small, but in feline language, it's actually quite powerful. They're controlling the flow. By simply placing their body in that space, your cat can stop a human 10 times their size. You slow down, you step around them, you react to their presence. And from your cat's perspective, that interaction reinforces something important. They matter in this environment. It boosts their sense of confidence inside their territory. They're not trying to dominate you in a hostile way. It's more like they're reinforcing their place in the shared space you both live in. In their mind, that hallway isn't just a path. It's part of their domain. And by occupying the exact spot where movement happens, they're quietly announcing, "This is my space too." Second, they might actually be guiding you somewhere. This next reason is surprisingly clever. Many people associate herding behavior with dogs, but cats are also very good at steering human behavior, just in subtler ways. Have you ever noticed something interesting? The moment you stop because your cat blocked your path, they suddenly stand up. Then they walk a few steps ahead of you, just far enough that you keep following, toward the kitchen, toward the food bowl, toward the place where the treats are kept. This isn't coincidence. Your cat has likely learned something about how your brain works. If they sit in another room and simply meow, you might ignore them. If they sit quietly somewhere, you might not even notice. But when they interrupt your movement, they instantly capture your full attention. You stop walking, you look down, you acknowledge them. That's exactly the reaction they want. So instead of calling you from across the house, your cat intercepts you mid-route and redirects your path. It's a surprisingly effective strategy. In fact, many cats figure out that blocking a hallway guarantees a response far faster than almost any other behavior. So when your cat steps in front of you and then starts walking ahead, they're not just in your way. They might actually be leading the way. By now you've probably realized something. When a cat blocks your path, it's rarely random. They're not just wandering into your way by accident. Very often, they're doing it deliberately. Sometimes to guide you, sometimes to get your attention. But there's another behavior that confuses owners even more. Because occasionally, your cat doesn't just stand in your way. They do something far more dramatic. You're walking toward them, and suddenly, your cat drops onto the floor right in front of your feet. Not gently, not slowly. They just flop down, sometimes rolling onto their back and stretching out across the entire hallway. For a split second, it feels like a trap for your ankles. But in the language of cats, that moment carries a very different meaning. Third, the trust flop. When a cat rolls onto their back in your path and exposes their belly, they are showing something incredibly important: vulnerability. A cat's stomach protects their most vital organs. In the wild, exposing that area is extremely risky. Predators target the belly. And even in fights between cats, protecting the stomach is a top priority. So a cat would never casually expose their belly to something they truly considered dangerous. When your cat flops down right in front of you and rolls onto their back, they are essentially saying, "I trust you completely." They're placing themselves in a position where they know you won't hurt them, even though you're bigger, even though you're moving toward them, even though they just made it very difficult for you to walk. That's why behaviorists often see this as a high-trust gesture. Now, it might look like they're asking for a belly rub, but many cat owners know the truth. Sometimes that belly is a trap. You reach down to pet it, and suddenly claws appear. That doesn't mean your cat was being deceptive. Often the belly exposure isn't really about being touched at all. It's about creating a moment of connection. By dropping directly into your path, your cat forces you to stop. You look down, you acknowledge them. For a few seconds, your attention is completely on them. And for a social animal like a domestic cat, that moment of shared focus can be incredibly meaningful. Fourth, they may actually be marking you with their scent. Another reason cats block your path has to do with something humans often overlook: smell. Cats live in a world that is heavily guided by scent. Much more than sight, much more than sound. Their bodies contain special scent glands in several places, especially around the cheeks, forehead, chin, and along the sides of their body. When cats rub against objects or against people, they leave behind tiny chemical signals called pheromones. These pheromones act like invisible messages. They tell other cats, "This place is safe. This belongs to someone in my group. This is familiar." So when your cat positions themselves directly in your walking path, something interesting often happens. As you try to step around them, your leg brushes against their body, or they quickly rub their cheek against your ankle. To you, it might just feel like a quick little bump, but to your cat, it's a scent exchange. In groups of cats, this behavior is sometimes called allo rubbing. Cats rub against each other to create a shared scent profile. It's almost like wearing the same team uniform. Everyone smells similar, which tells the group they belong together. When your cat blocks you and rubs against your legs, they're doing the same thing. They're tagging you with their scent and picking up yours at the same time. It's their way of reinforcing something very simple but very important in the feline social world. You're part of my group. You belong here. By now you've seen that when your cat blocks your path, it isn't just random behavior. Sometimes they're claiming territory. Sometimes they're guiding you toward food or attention. Sometimes they're even showing a surprising level of trust by flopping onto their back right in front of your feet. But there's one more reason cats love to become a living speed bump in your hallway, and this one has less to do with instinct, and more to do with how closely your cat studies you every single day. Fifth, they're interrupting your routine. Cats are incredibly observant creatures, much more observant than most people realize. They watch your habits. They notice the times you wake up. They recognize the sound of the refrigerator door. They even learn the difference between the footsteps you make when you're heading to the kitchen and the ones you make when you're leaving the house. But there's another thing they notice very clearly: when you're on autopilot. Maybe you're rushing through the house getting ready for work. Maybe you're staring at your phone. Maybe you're carrying laundry or thinking about a dozen things at once. From your cat's perspective, those moments look like this. You're moving through the house, but you're not interacting with them. To a cat, that makes you temporarily boring. And for an animal that depends on interaction, stimulation, and attention, a boring human is a problem worth solving. So your cat chooses the one strategy they know will always work. They put themselves directly in your path. In a narrow hallway or doorway, you can't ignore a physical obstacle. You have to stop. You have to look down. You have to react. And the moment you do, your cat has successfully broken your routine. It's their version of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, look at me for a second. I'm more interesting than that phone." For many indoor cats, especially ones that spend most of their day alone while their humans work or run errands, these small interruptions become an important way to create interaction. They've learned something very simple about humans. If they sit quietly somewhere, they might be ignored. But if they stand exactly where you need to walk, they become impossible to overlook. It's a perfectly calculated attention strategy. Why this behavior is actually a compliment. So the next time you find yourself trapped in the hallway by a 10-pound ball of fur, try not to get frustrated. Because from your cat's perspective, that moment says something important. Whether they're asserting confidence in their territory, guiding you toward their food bowl, marking you with their scent, or simply demanding a little attention during your busy day, they're doing it for the same reason. You are the center of their world. Your cat isn't just randomly getting in your way. They're choosing to place themselves right in the middle of your life. And if you really think about it, that little furry roadblock in the hallway might actually be one of the clearest signs that your cat wants to stay connected with you. So now I'm curious. Does your cat have a specific spot in the house where they always stop you? A hallway? The kitchen doorway? Right in front of the bathroom? Because if they do, chances are that spot isn't random at all.